Do you think that this visit will starve off the Republican movement, which has been trying to gain momentum, particularly after the death of the Queen?
Well, the Republican issue is a real interesting one, especially for the monarchy, because King Charles has always said that he's not going to stand in anyone's way if they want to go on their own. We've seen it with Barbados. There's been rumblings in the Caribbean. Certainly Jamaica have had issues with the government of the day saying that there is going to be a republic in due course, but it hasn't really materialised. And I think when you look at the shifts of what's happening in Australia, certainly Anthony Albanese's government has said that it's not necessarily on the agenda right about now. So I think if this tour is a success and people are seeing King Charles enjoying himself, seeing him paying tribute to the real issues that Australians hold dear, talking about climate change, talking about community aspect of why he's there, then it's going to be a real boost for the monarchy and a boost for Charles's relationship with Australia.
Let's go back in time now to some of the past royal trips to Australia. Kate and William, of course, they came back in 2014 with little Prince George at the time. This was their first trip to Australia. How were they received?
Well, can you believe it? It's 10 years ago since William and Kate were in Australia, and certainly that tour really set along the Wales's journey. They were obviously the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge back then. Little Prince George got a huge reception, and I think that when you look at royal tours, that is easily one of the most successful in history. Huge crowds greeting them wherever they went. Of course, you had the baby factor, George absolutely loving the crowds as well. And for William and Kate, they were still pretty much newlyweds at the time. They'd only been married 2 or 3 years, and that really settled them into royal life. And I think when they looking along the successes that they've had together as a couple and blossoming their young family, that trip was certainly right up there.
So George wasn't even 12 months at the time. How much did Australia love seeing him?
Well, we all love a smiling baby, and the Aussies were no different. I mean, George was not even 12 months old, and at Taronga Zoo, the pictures of him with the bilby, they went absolutely all over the country and around the world. This was Prince George in his element as just a little kid, and we don't normally see that interaction with the young royal children too much, but William and Kate were really keen to introduce him to Australians, and I think that tells you a lot about what they're about as a family. They knew about the fact that they wanted to introduce George at a very early stage to royal life, and he's gone from strength to strength as he's got older. Of course, he's going to have a hugely important role within the royal family, being a future king, and I think that really set him on the path to success.
And the couple also followed in the footsteps of Charles and Diana, because they also visited Uluru. There's a lovely image of both Kate and William, and then, of course, the original image of Charles and Diana. And when you think back, both tours are very similar because they both brought a baby with them.
Well, Kate and William's tour was always going to be compared to Diana's and Charles's, and both tours very similar in terms of bringing a baby to them as well. But what was different about Kate and William's was the affection shown between them that was pretty much lacking from Charles and Diana as well. You can almost see the cracks of their relationship appearing before our very eyes when they were down under. But for Kate and William, their trip to Uluru was really special, and the fact that they left Prince George behind, because he was only 12 months old, it was very important for them to pay tribute to such a sentimental place. And I think when you look at the success of royal tours, that was a really good decision to get out to not only the public but to visit the traditional elements of Australia and pay tribute to such a special place.
Let's talk about Prince Harry in his single days. He was certainly very popular with the women here in Australia. At one point, he got a marriage proposal. Women tried to kiss him. How popular was he back then?
Well, of course, it was a very different world for Prince Harry when he was last in Australia as a single man. He was having marriage proposals, young women were throwing themselves at him, and he was taking it in his stride. I think he really liked the attention. He liked being the sort of joker of the royal pack. But very, very different for Prince Harry now. And living in America, a wife, 2 children, I think we've seen him grow in a certain aspect, but perhaps missing a bit of the mischievous side that he had in his younger days.
How would you describe Harry and Meghan's tour of Australia back in 2018?
Well, I remember Harry and Meghan's tour of Australia because I followed it inch by inch, day by day, and it was an absolutely packed schedule when we were there in 2018. And perhaps that was the catalyst for Meghan and Harry to decide to pull back from the royal family. Indeed, I think they found it quite daunting, stressful at times. Indeed, on the first day of the tour, the couple had announced that Meghan was expecting their first child. And since then, the tour really gathered a huge level of publicity. And I think that caught them unaware. It's quite surprising almost, because here were the new star pack of the royal family, and they didn't actually get to grips with it. Indeed, Meghan found it quite daunting. She couldn't believe the amount of people that had turned up outside the Sydney Opera House, or indeed even to the airport, to see them, and I think she thought, this necessarily isn't the life for me. It's not what I came into this family for. And a lot of people would say that's surprising, but you could almost see the chinks in the armour of both the Duke and Duchess of Sussex at that point, and of course the rest is history.
So do you think then Australia broke the couple? I mean, they spoke about this being the trip that changed everything.
There's certainly a real argument for saying that Australia broke Harry and Meghan. Indeed, it was one of the catalysts, I think, for them leaving the royal family. They didn't really get to grips with the popularity of the tour. There were thousands and thousands of people at all different parts of that tour who wanted to see them. And I think Meghan really found that difficult to get to grips with. And it wasn't soon after they were having conversations about leaving the royal family and made that decision finally in January 2020 and blew it up from the inside. But it's interesting when you look back at the tour of the strains and pressures. Of course, Meghan had just announced that she was pregnant, and I think that all of this encompassed into finding it quite stressful. And it really is a case of what could have been for Harry and Meghan. And even though Australia tour was such a success, it's really unfortunate that we're not going to see another one of them as part of the royal family.
Camilla has accompanied her husband many times to Australia, but this will be her first as Queen. How fond is she of Australia?
Well, of course, Australia is hugely important for Camilla, not only in her role as Queen, supporting the King as Prince of Wales in his many trips to the country, but it's a place where she really feels comfortable. And I think the travel aspect of it notwithstanding, we know Camilla doesn't really like the long-haul travel, but I think on this tour you're going to see her really get to grips of the community work that she does in the UK and abroad. You're going to see her pay tribute to women's groups, and I think that for Camilla, Australia is such an important part of the monarchy, and indeed her husband's role as well. So she's going to be absolutely diving into it head first.
Overall, Russell, why do you think the royals keep coming back down under?
Well, you know, you could say it's just for the weather. It's pretty grim in autumn and winter in the UK. But seriously, Australia has a unique place in the royal family's hearts. It's somewhere where we find a huge companionship with Aussies. It's somewhere where we have shared history. There's obviously a lot of Brits who come and go to live in Australia, and vice versa. We love having the Aussies in the UK. But when you look at the basis of the monarchy, our shared history, our shared values, the fact that the Commonwealth is such an important part of our legacy for both countries, it's hugely important for the members of the royal family, including the King, Queen. Hopefully the Prince and Princess of Wales will get back down under very, very soon, because it's a real special place in all of our hearts.